On tonight's NWA, life in the fast lane with legendary Mancunian Martin Hannett and life in the bus lane with Wirral photographer Tom Wood.
Martin Hannett was the most innovative record producer ever to come out of Manchester. He created the meticulous cacophony of Joy Division, a manicured noise that changed the way pop records sounded. And after that, everybody wanted him, including U2. But Martin was a tortured soul, an artist, a maverick, a true genius, and in some ways a right pain in the arse. Without Martin, the sound of factory records would never have shaken the world. And without Martin, things were never quite the same. Quite patently, I'm not Michael Aspel, but Martin Hannett, this was your life.
Right, we all start when the drum machine starts, lads.
I've got no doubt at all, he was a genius.
I think the whole city, you know, I was in enormous debt.
I think that his influence is what has made Manchester's music in the last 20 years something internationally recognised.
Manchester in the 70s was a different place to what it is now. There wasn't much future. The nightclubs were terrible, absolutely terrible. It wasn't a fun place to live.
We were waiting for something to come along that said, you know, rabid dogs. You know, we knew that there was a feeling in the air that something was going to change. We didn't know what it was. And we came across Slaughtering the Dogs.
The real musical involvement comes with him ringing me up to go and see this band Slaughtering the Dogs. It was somewhere halfway between Iggy Pop and something else, but it was very strange and delightful. But that was actually exactly 2 weeks before the Pistols gig.
As we were looking at them, Martin was approached by Richard Boone with Buzzcocks.
Spyro Scratch was the thing that established him in that generation of musicians' eyes as the sympathetic producer, you know, for that generation of albums that started getting made.
We were just scrappy, back of the cigarette packet sort of people, you know, we didn't have any business plan, no money, and we just did things on the spur of the moment.
Here we go, 2, 3, 4.
The single was a hit, and I think I remember Tosh Ryan saying, oh, we won't have a follow-up, we'll confuse everyone at Radio 1. And at the time I thought, oh, that's a really clever idea. But now I think it's a bit stupid, really. Or was it? I don't know, because I mean that record is remembered in this little section of time very clearly by a lot of people, and very affectionately.
It's the end for you and me.
He came in one day and he'd obviously been reading this article about this guy Maurice Oberstein, head of CBS Records. And he says, send this guy a record and tell him his label's crap. So we wrote him this stroppy letter and sent him like a Cooper Clarke record. And the following week, we got a phone call saying he was going to come up and see us. And that was the start of Martin's big budget record career.
At the time, I'd say to Martin, you know, we can't afford this. You know, we can't afford to spend 30 or 40 grand in the studio for a poet that's going to sell 15,000 albums maximum.
And that was a bit of indulgence, really. Martin brought a lot of his friends in to play music.
Martin wasn't going to compromise in any way at all, and again, he obviously had a vision of what you know, the music that would work for John to recite over, and was clearly proved right. I mean, those albums are fabulous.
I remember Martin saying, coming to me with I think it was Ideal for Living EP that Joy Division had put out, and he said, this is the dance music of the 80s. I just thought, you know, not for me.
Tosh said, I didn't want anything to do with them because they were miserable bastards. But me and Martin used to go and see them quite a few times, and we thought, yeah, we should do something with them. I mean, it's best that they went to Factory, really, because they had more of a vision and a more clear identity.
What they did was what we didn't do, which was to actually market something. They were like a Thatcherite kind of record company as far as I could make out.
Whatever it seemed like later at the time, it was like just pulling Martin into our circle. And I think, as with people like Martin or Peter Saville or Ben Kelly or any of the people we work with, the freedom that you give them, they really appreciate and really like. So Martin liked the attitude that, you know, yeah, come and work with Vinnie and come and work with Joy Division and do whatever you want.
How much do you feel you contributed to the success of Factory Records?
Very little. All I did was make a few records. Nothing, is it?
Well, I don't know. Is it?
But in the world of market forces, it doesn't mean a lot, does it? A world composed entirely of market forces, that is.
He was just a catalyst, and he'd be into all types of new gear. I mean, you're talking about 1978 here, and we'd have big ARP synthesizers, and we'd be plugging pins in our Martin wood and getting bass drum sounds out of synthesizers. And this is the days of punk, really.
He would just try anything and everything, and things would occur to him that would never occur to anybody else.
And he'd push a fader or turn a knob until there was a terrible feedback or there'd be a big bang and the engineer would look very nervous. And but he'd just laugh and say, right, that's the sound we want.
When we recorded with him, he spent about 3 hours setting up. He put a little microphone on my thumb, about that big, and it took hours to do it, so it cost a lot of money. And he did it all just so I could play this track, and all you got was my thumb clicking. This took hours to make. Anyway, apparently it's on the record. And when we heard the tape back, I said, Martin, I can't hear the thumb track. And he said, yeah, but you know it's there, don't you?
He had this sociological work in studio whereby he would put the groups under incredible pressure and would actually pull their brains around sort of surrealistically and get things out of them.
First time I met Martin, he came sweeping into the studio and went straight through the rec room, the snooker room, up to the microwave and beckoned everybody over. He wanted to display how to blow an egg up. You know, so he put an egg in a little bowl.
It's a famous microwave story.
And turned the microwave on and waited for the egg to explode. So we all gathered round, you know, this is one of our points of great tension, waiting for the egg to explode.
The famous story, which is true, I was there when he, after a day and a half putting Steve Morris through his drum sound on the beginning of Unknown Pleasures sessions, finally tells Steve to disassemble the drum kit.
He made him take the whole drum kit apart and take the springs out of each one. There must have been about 50 springs in the whole drum kit because he could hear the springs resonating. So it could be a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes, you know.
He got his idea in his head that the Hacienda wasn't going to make any money, that it was going to eat all the factory profits. And even though other people tried to talk him into the deal, he fell out of factory.
As far as I was concerned, it just had a lot to do with my budgets, you know, which suddenly vanished down a hole in the ground called the Hacienda.
Martin's attitude was that we shouldn't be getting involved in nightclubs. You know, you should stick to what you know, and we should be getting involved in high-tech music, which of course, was he right, you know, was he right?
And he hated Tony Wilson after that, didn't he? It obsessed him.
Yes. I think he had a bit of a funny run.
I used to hear stories about him, didn't he phone up Rob Gressin and...
Yeah.
What happened?
Fired a gun into the phone, yeah. I mean, he got a solicitor's letter about that.
Well,
Martin was off the case in that period in the mid-80s. You know, some drugs are good and some drugs are bad, but whatever he was doing, they weren't good.
But he'd always been difficult to work with, but it just made it worse. See, Martin had it in his head that you could live forever on heroin. That it was the ultimate drug.
I think Martin probably had a view that he could handle this because it was another area of his experimentation. He was a scientist.
I don't know if it was because he was trying to kick his drug habit and he started drinking a lot. I believe he was drinking a lot of brandy, but he ballooned out. He went really, really overweight.
He was a big guy by the time we were working with him. But he'd been doing some live gig, and he'd leaned over like this to, you know, adjust some fine fine-tuning at the top of the desk, and the whole sound had like gone completely haywire. Come back off the desk, you know, been looking around, what's happened? And what actually happened was that his stomach had pushed all the faders right across the whole length of the desk up into this huge arc shape, and that's what he called the Martin Hannett sound curve, and he was quite proud of that, I think.
The best thing and the luckiest thing and the nicest thing about looking back on the story is that there was a second coming for us.
I heard that he was working with other bands and he was mixing from, not in the control room, but the next room with the door open, and that's how he liked to mix. And then the next thing I heard was that he was mixing from home, down the end of the telephone. Someone had held the phone out and he'd listen to the mix on the telephone. So it seemed to be a bit of a decline going on there.
Well, he was just ill, he just felt ill, and he went to the doctors, and apparently I found out after he died, the doctor wanted him to... No, the doctor made an appointment at the hospital, which he went to the appointment the next day. And I found out after he died that the doctor at the hospital wanted him to go in straight away.
He'd been to see his doctor and they'd told him he'd got to stop drinking, smoking, taking pills. And he just said, they've told me I'm dying, and I've got a week or 2 weeks if I don't do this.
Martin sits there quite firmly in the history of the recording process. The history of the recording process on both sides of the Atlantic, and you can probably take Kraftwerk in as well and have a bit of European consciousness.
I know my career was created for me by Martin's genius, and I'm very careful about the way I use the word genius. And it's overused, but in Martin's case, I've got no doubt at all he was a genius.
I think everybody, I think the whole city, owes an enormous debt. I don't think this incredible, this crazy world where, Buzzcock Smith, Joy Division, M People, Simply Red, etc., Oasis, this whole great tradition, I think, Martin is so central to all that.
The thing is, it's like myths. Myths are interesting because the people around whom myths are built are that's kind of indicative of the kind of person they must have been in the first place.
1981, Tom Wood from the Wirral began taking photos from buses. 15 years later, his work's just gone on show at the Galerie du Jour in Paris. In November, it transfers to the ICP in New York. The critics say it's a work of genius. This is a ticket to ride.
This is about a journey, or a series of journeys. So there's the literal journey of the bus from point A to point B. There's the journey that the photographer took in producing the work, which was a 15-year journey. There's the journey of Britain under Thatcherism into post-Thatcherism. It's a journey from one style of photography to another style of photography. It's a kind of critique about people who have to try, in a sense, who's travelling in buses now anyway.
I think it describes a city and a time and place from a different angle, from one that you don't know. People have photographed Liverpool a lot, obviously, over the years, from Cartier-Bresson onwards, but I think this is probably the best photography of Liverpool because it's done within a very close frame. The starting point is from the bus system, and it sort of captures everything in that net. It's about light and human behaviour, basically.
I think it would be easy to be quite glib and say, you know, it's part of that genre of social documentary, sort of tough up north, gritty, grainy realism, people eating chips with love bites on the beach and sort of getting into punch-ups having had too much to drink. But I think his work is about far more than that. He looks on the inside of people. I think he sort of has a care and an empathy for the subject matter and the people, and I think he's a humanitarian photographer, if there's such a thing.
We came down to take part in this documentary, and the parts we were playing was a group of 4 ladies, and when I looked at the picture, it was actually the lady as my father's distant cousin and a friend, but they're old neighbours, old friends. It seems such an amazing coincidence.
It's very quiet work. It's not work that immediately jumps out at you, and it's if you take the time and the trouble to actually read it and appreciate it, I think it will speak a volume.
I think about one of the images that he actually produces is actually on the top of a double-decker bus, and the double-decker bus is parked up and there's all people on the top, and then there's loads of leaves because it's parked by a tree, and the leaves come through the tree, and everybody will have seen that image if they've travelled on top of a bus, but it was just the way he caught it in a really unusual way. It was almost surreal to look at.
Why I think Tom has been so clever is that he's used the bus, the transport system, as a kind of mobile hide, as if he's a sort of bird watcher, and it gives him a kind of impunity for his work. So he can photograph from the safety of the bus because people don't quite know he's there.
There have been debates about the role of the photographer, about the wisdom of being a neutral person, someone who's supposedly neutral, when in fact no one who's taking photographs can be entirely neutral. Everyone has an axe to grind, everyone has a viewpoint. Tom definitely has an axe to grind. He's a socially concerned person. He's concerned perhaps with what we've lost, with what's been lost, and these pictures are deceptive. I think we need some help because we can't read his mind.
I feel like the way that he has photographed people and they are runaways is not in any way judgmental. I mean, is it possible he can go and ask him for a model release as he's sitting on the top of a bus? I mean, it's not a feasible thing. Tom is putting this in context. He's being quite gentle and kind in his use of people that are unawares.
I love work that reminds me of the simple things that we all share, like the thrill of being on the top of a bus on a sunny day and seeing people going about their business. And there's a wonderful one by Tom that captures that better than any other photograph I know. And I just love looking at it. It's the 5 ages of womanhood, I think. And there's a little girl and a slightly older one, and then a mum, and then a granny, and they're all sort of knit together by glances and so on, and it's terrifically full of affection.
He's both modest, he doesn't have a reputation, his work doesn't fit into easy categories, and therefore it takes some photographer of renown coming and seeing that work and saying, this is excellent work. It took that to get this excellent body of work to get an exhibition.
To get American backing like Tom Wood's got in the form of Lee Friedlander is a wonderful bonus for him. Without a doubt, a lot of people in the States have responded to Tom's work in the way that they haven't responded in this country. We're perhaps a little blasé. The Americans are very excited about it. It's a look at Britain from a position which is quite strange to them. We're quite nervous of this kind of work in Britain. The Americans embrace it. They believe that photography can impart great social truths. We're much more sceptical.
I'm not really interested in them. I've got to be honest, like you could say I am, but I'm not, you know. I see too much real life outside. You graffiti on the bus stops and you people waiting at the bus stops and the children and that, yeah, they're a reflection of what we do see out there, yeah. Basically the drunks when they get on and the antics they get up to, you know, the ones who they're not all nasty, and a lot of them are funny. You can't sit down properly, or you expect them to read their minds when they want to get off and come flying down the bus. I've had a few characters on.
Things people say on buses. You meet them all on public transport, from every walk of life. It could be a Fred West in his Sunday best, or the local vicar's wife. Anyway, I vacated my seat, got to my feet and went upstairs for a bit of a look. Upstairs it was worse for those who are cursed, a life in the bus lane or the back of a hearse. Way out layabouts with something to say about the weather or whatever, or if ever there's a way out. Commuters with computers, witnesses who've lied, ordinary people just there for the ride. There's women harassed in the role which they're cast. The future which suits you is already past. Old codgers mention the state of their pension, while fair dodgers show the first signs of tension. Weather-beaten faces pause for reflection, waiting for a sign of a new direction. And the scally's right on the back seat, Manx must die, but we almost die for the young to survive.
I've printed some of the pictures every year at different sizes and different grades. I'll take a print down and he'll ask him what he thinks. And he'll say, not a smidgen too light or dark, but half a smidgen. The day of the work was being ready to be sent off for New York, I had to print a picture with an hour to go that he decided after 2 years it wasn't right.
Tom says the work speaks for itself. Well, that's plainly rubbish. It's the photographer who speaks, and the work is a kind of a mask between what he intends to say and the viewer who looks at the picture and tries to work out what is intended. If it has something to say, it would appear to me to be coming from a socially concerned position. And what I see in those pictures is a concern with the trip, the journey, from there being something like a working class culture to its betrayal and its destruction.
I always thought that the still photograph was absolutely terrific because it's got complete suspense in it. And this is one of the really good things about Tom's work. And I think he adds to that suspense by working usually from a moving vehicle from inside a bus. So that you not only have the cut-out moment of reality in a small frame, just that moment held forever, but you've got the feeling of the bus in transit, so that makes you even more aware of this one scrap of time that therefore becomes really loaded with significance.
There's not a lot of work being invested in making a tradition of British photography based on documentation, and Tom's work fits right into that category. Okay, 10 years have gone by, and nowadays the people who were the stars in the mid-80s taking documentary photographs are no longer the stars. They're working for Magnum, or they're working for the Telegraph magazine or something like that. I mean, those days of the documentary photographer being the king of photography in this country are over. So in a sense, he's a kind of a lone figure in the landscape at the moment.